the story behind the Prophet ﷺ marrying Aisha at a young age?
So the question is a very common one, and that is that many people, non-Muslims and sometimes even Muslims, are perturbed that how come Aisha, our mother, was married at a very young age. And frankly, this is a question that people who study anthropology and intelligent researchers that are non-Muslim never bring up. Because what is happening here is that we are taking our cultural mores, our cultural norms, and then back projecting them onto the Arabian society. You see, the age of marriage is something that has no normative, no standard age. And cultures and ethnicities throughout the centuries had different ages of marriage. Shakespeare wrote his famous Romeo and Juliet. Do you know that the first actors that played Romeo and Juliet were how old? 15 and 14 years old. The boy was 15, the girl was 14. For Shakespeare's time, now if we had a Romeo and Juliet play, the content and the love scenes and the romance, we would project it onto an 18 or 19 and a 19 or 17-year-old, you know? We would say, oh, this is a young man and a young woman. In our age, in 2014, Romeo and Juliet, we think of like a 19-year-old with his 17-year-old sweetheart or 18-year-old sweetheart. That's our version. Well, when Shakespeare wrote the play, it was for a 14-year-old and a 15-year-old. Right? Only 500 years ago. In that age and time, people matured faster. They were not treated like little kids in the bodies of adults. Adolescence didn't exist in that regard. When you became a young man or woman, biologically mature, you were treated like a young man and a woman. And therefore, culture changes. In America, 100 years ago, young ladies would get married regularly at the age of 13 and 14. That is why until very recently, literally like a few decades ago, in some states, including my own state of Tennessee where I currently live, the law said that you have to be 14 years old to get married. Recently they changed that, updated that. But when the laws were written 100 years ago, what was the age they put for marriage? 14. Now you tell me, today, if somebody marries a 14-year-old, he's going to go to jail. But their own grandmothers and grandfathers, forget their own. Let me be totally blunt here. My grandmother, may Allah Azza wa Jal bless her with Jannah, she's passed away. She's the only grandparent I ever met of mine. My grandmother in rural India, back in the 1920s, she got married at the age of 13. My grandmother. And I knew her as a very righteous, as a very good, Muslim lady. She never complained or she was irritated her whole life. My father married me when I was 13. She had a great grandfather, that's my grandfather. She's a great husband. She had lots of children. That was the cultural norms. Why are you defending Aisha when Aisha was the happiest wife in the whole world? Who are you to get irritated when Aisha herself was the luckiest, most fortunate woman in the whole world? She wasn't complaining. She wasn't feeling anything bad. So in that day and age, puberty, intellectual maturity, in the hot Arabian climate, in the desert life, young children age faster because you have to take on responsibilities. So Aisha's age in her time would be our equivalent of whatever, 16, 17. And I have no doubt that if things proceed in another 100 years, it will be illegal to marry an 18 or 17-year-old. And I have no doubt, because we're progressing or whatever, regressing in that regard. The minimum marriage age will be rising as it has risen in the last 600 years. This is a human fact. This is an undeniable fact. Western culture itself has continued to raise the age of marriage. So for us to now criticize Arabian culture 14 centuries ago, you begin with criticizing your own grandmother and grandfather and your own ancestors of the Middle Ages. That is really not a very rational thing to do. Different time, different culture, different place. Bottom line, the worst enemies of the Prophet ﷺ in his lifetime, they tried everything to smear him. They did not find it problematic that he married Aisha. It was a norm of the culture, and it wasn't a problem at all in their society and culture. Even his worst enemies, not a single comment, because this is the norm. Aisha herself is a happy wife. She is a loving wife. She has so many ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ. She clearly has not been traumatized. Why are you guys 14 centuries later so traumatized? So think about it and be a little bit more mature, a little bit more anthropological, a little bit more historical. There's absolutely nothing wrong. And Muslims, don't apologize for the truth and don't distort the truth. There are Muslims that try to deny this. Oh, he didn't marry Aisha as a young girl. Ya akhi, look, that's not the way forward. We don't lie for the sake of our religion. Astaghfirullah. We have the truth. We're not going to cover up the truth if people find it embarrassing. This is the reality. Deal with it. Our Prophet ﷺ married a young girl and it was fine for the time. I am not saying we need to resurrect this age in our time, because times have changed. And there's no problem in our time. My own Shaykh Ibn Uthaymin rahimahullah ta'ala, he was of the opinion that we should have a minimal age of marriage, 15, 16, whatever the call. He didn't specify an age, I'm specifying, but he said, yes, we should have a minimal age that society now is used to and accustomed to. That's not a problem. But for us to find something worthy of criticism that's different culture, different time, different place, the Sharia has allowed a spectrum. This is the point. Islamic law, it allows a spectrum. In societies and cultures where younger marriages happen and it's common, let it happen. In modern times, I will be the first person to say that an 11-year-old in modern Arabia or Yemen or Pakistan is not ready for marriage. I'll be the first to say this. I'll be the first to say we need to have laws that are in place that the young lady is now mentally capable of being a married lady. She's physically capable, no problem. But for our Prophet ﷺ, it's a different time, different place. Everybody's used to it. Aisha herself was prepared for it. So who are we to get in the middle of their issue that they didn't even have any issue about? And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best.